All right, what's up, everybody? Welcome to the SNES Super Stars Marathon Donkey Kong Country Warpless Run. I'm joined here by my co-commentators Snack Pack and Lead Ostrich. If you guys want to say hi.
Hey everybody, I'm Snack Pack.
Hey there, Lead Ostrich here.
Sweet. Looks like we're just about ready to get started here. For a little bit of background on this category, DKC Warpless is actually one of the hardest categories in the game, despite being a miscellaneous category that, not too many people have put very much time into. But if anyone knows Lovebird here, they have pretty much dominated every category in this game, so we're at the point where we're now optimizing this really difficult side category, so it should be quite the treat to watch.
Yeah, Silent Wolf, why don't you tell us what makes Warpless so much harder than something like All Stages?
Yeah, so the thing about Warpless is, well, let's say All Stages is the main category. In All Stages, there's a lot of skips that we do, or warps, that obviously we won't be doing in this category since it's Warpless. So we'll not only be playing a lot more of the stages than we do in All Stages, but a lot of those stages also have their own very precise tricks that you have to do to maneuver through those stages as well. We'll see some of those coming up pretty soon in the run.
Right, I believe there are 7 developer-intended warps that exist in the game that you're not allowed to use in this category. In addition, there's a wrong warp you can do on the map, a wrong warp you can do in platform perils, and also you're not allowed to enter any bonuses to help you through the stage, which you would normally do in 1-2 here. So those are all things that are different in Warpless.
Yeah, so in 1-...
Part of the rules of the category include not being able to enter any bonus stages or anything that will warp you even out to something that's intended.
Yeah, and already in 1-2 here, we're seeing a trick that you wouldn't normally see in all stages. Something called a super free roll, where we set up a super jump, and then once we initiate that super jump, we grab onto a rope, shimmy down the rope, and then roll off a ledge, and then we have the super jump state that allows us to hover while rolling through the air. And we can do that through that stage to save a pretty minimal amount of time. I think it's like 1 or 2 seconds or something.
Yeah, but as the name Super Free Roll suggests, it is pretty free to do that in most stages where one exists, mostly because it's not a frame-perfect trick, and it looks almost identical to the untrained eye to a very, very difficult frame-perfect trick called the Super Jump Roll, which we'll be seeing a number of in this run.
Right, that's the thing about Warpless is you're not allowed to warp, but all other glitches to help you get through stages are fair game, and you will be seeing a fair number of those throughout the run.
Yeah, there's a number of very cool glitches actually, which is the exciting thing about this category, because you get to see showcased a lot of stages that you would otherwise just kind of skip right through.
Yeah, something else I want to point out while we're in the water stage here. The trick is called the Super Free Roll, mostly because the first one that was found in Misty Mine in World 6 is pretty free, but not all of them are very free. Like the one in Forest Frenzy is actually quite difficult, that we'll see coming up in World 3 pretty soon. Basically, we're pretty good at naming tricks in the DKC community.
That one might be my fault. I did name that one.
Yeah, 3 out of the 4 water stages here don't have anything glitch-wise in them, but that's one of the cool things about this category is there's kind of a good almost a half and half picture between about half the stages you'll see them played just as intended, but optimally, and then the other half have glitches or some other shenanigans going on.
There's actually a number of categories too for this game, which is kind of nice that showcase different parts of each stage. So, like for example here, this stage is technically being played as intended, but there are a lot of developer-intended skips, like these barrels up at the top here, basically launch you to the end of the stage. But there are categories like no major skips where even those kind of intended skips aren't allowed.
Yeah, this game in general is really rich in its categories. Like, for something as, not too far out there as Warpless to not even be a main category is a testament to that, I'd say. Because if you look at DKC 2, DKC 3, where Warpless is a main category, this game just has so many other categories, like 7 main categories or however many it is. that people consider, you know, more vital than Warpless. It just really shows like how rich this game is and you know, the different ways that you can play it.
And it's something I think that it's kind of sneaky because there's essentially an optimal way to play a stage for every category, but sometimes there are minor differences. Like, for example, how many Kongs you have with you entering a stage can change from run to run. Because just by having a Diddy and Donkey out here on the world map, you lose, I think it's 10 frames for every time that you move from one point on the map to the other. So sometimes it's worth not having both your Kongs with you for some of the game, and sometimes to set up specific glitches, you need to have one Kong out or the other. So you will see a lot of different slight variations in each stage depending on the category.
Right. Speaking of the developer-intended warps, though, this is the first stage that we are that has one that we'll be skipping. And so at the beginning, there's a warp, a hidden warp that lets you skip 90% of this stage. But on this category, you've got to play the whole thing out in the minecart.
Yeah, and the stage is actually like pretty tough to optimize, or not just pretty tough to optimize, but it's also kind of scary to play optimally. Like, you know, you think auto scrollers, you know, they're tough casually, but once you get into the speedrun and learn them, they're pretty trivial. But this one is like actually kind of tricky because like the speed tech that you do, it doesn't always result in the same speed each time. So when you're really trying to optimize these jumps that you're doing to preserve your momentum throughout the stage, sometimes you end up with like more or less than you did, and you can find yourself like, you know, ending up farther than you normally would after a specific jump and falling off the ledge or taking damage. So it's actually pretty stressful playing this stage.
Yeah, this is one of those rare stages that is difficult casually, and then when you learn the speedrun, it is difficult for different reasons.
Mm-hmm.
Now, this is one of the hardest early stages in the game, pretty much no matter which way you slice it. But there isn't really... I don't think there's any differences in this stage from category to category, except for obviously 101% where you're going to get all the bonuses. But this is a deceptively difficult stage for early in the game, difficult to optimize. There's just a lot of little things that can go wrong, like these tire rolls here can be very tricky. And rolling under these bees and just trying to kind of squeeze every frame that you can out of a stage that you end up playing a lot when you're resetting and
yeah, that was beautifully done right there.
Now here's another developer-intended warp that this stage is absolutely trivial in a lot of categories because the warp isn't even difficult to find. You can stumble upon it casually pretty easily, and the stage itself is at least casually is actually kind of difficult. So I remember as a kid finding that warp and being very thankful I did, because it was this is not my favorite stage to play as a kid. Also, it's kind of spooky.
Yeah, something you'll see lovebird abusing a lot in this stage is rolling through the rock crocs, even when they're outside of their, you know, rock state and running around. For whatever reason, Diddy is just invulnerable to them as you're rolling through them. But if you like touch them in any other way, like jump out of your roll when you're inside of one of them, you will take damage.
There's a couple enemies in this game that just don't hurt you if you're rolling, and one of those enemies is also coming up in this stage, and it's going to be these big ol' millstones. For some reason, when you're rolling, it doesn't affect you.
Yeah, you can roll right through them, and then it also, if you're like in a bouncing state, like after having bounced on an enemy, you're also invulnerable to them for whatever reason. So you'll see lovebird abusing that quite a bit here.
Yeah, there's a fun little bounce that we'll do up here where it kind of, I don't know how much time it takes, probably a second or something, but it's just very simple. It's just kind of bounce straight through one of these. Here we go. And it looks so clean too. It's kind of nice.
Yeah, and this stage is another one that has a warp in it, so we've already skipped 3 warps now. World 2 is packed with them, so much longer in this category.
Yeah, I want to say a lot of the density in the stages that we normally skip in all stages in Warpless are kind of like World 2, World 3. Like we saw a couple in World 2, and then the first couple stages in World 3. We're going to have to play through those as well.
And then as you get through this game, as the stages go up, like some of those later stages just end up being seriously difficult regardless. And there's just kind of no way getting around it. You just have to kind of power through and learn them. You have to respect them, I guess, is what I'm trying to say.
Yeah, this is warp number 4. We're skipping. There's a DK only timed warp there. This skips most of this stage.
Yeah, I believe there's only 2 DK only warps in the game. Somebody correct me if I'm wrong, but it's interesting that they have them where this one's especially strange because you have to get to it quickly and be DK, who is slow.
Yeah, I feel like they were just digging for ways to make DK more useful.
Yeah, they should have kept digging.
Like even playing this game casually as a kid, it was like blatantly obvious that Diddy was the one you wanted to play as.
All right, so here's another stage, Treetop Town, one of my personal favorite stages. I just love the aesthetic of it. And normally you skip it, but here we actually get to see some really cool barrel work, and it's completing it is not super hard, but optimizing it can be really tricky because one wrong move and you just launch yourself to death. It is also just to say, it just looks cool. When done well, this stage is just impressive to watch.
You can notice a number of optimizations, skipping some of these barrels and timing them to spend as little time as possible for them to move back and forth. Very cool.
All right, coming up in Forest Frenzy, we're gonna see another version of the super free roll. But again, this one is anything but free. So we're gonna need to do, ideally, a frame perfect pause, but there's ways of adjusting. So there we didn't get a good pause, so we're gonna try again. But ideally you wanna get the frame perfect pause here, so you can just run off, make sure Diddy jumps off the top of the screen there. And then we're gonna slide off this rope.
Not killing yourself
platform
sliding
there.
off that rope is very difficult.
Yeah, it's
You can either go
very...
If you go too
very
fast, you
finicky.
just launch yourself down into the pit. And if you go too slowly, you can risk not touching ground, and you need to be able to touch ground again, otherwise you just kind of start floating upwards.
Yeah, I'd say that's the trickiest part of the trick, is just dismounting that rope without not landing on the ledge.
Yeah, and I don't know how much that the SFR saves in that stage, but there also is a super jump roll that you can do later on if you miss it, which is very tricky.
Yeah, it saves like 40 seconds or something crazy over playing the stage, like no major glitches style.
The second half of that stage is basically an auto scroller, but you can still skip some of it even if you're playing the stage normally.
So we're now in Temple Tempest. Just like Bouncy Bonanza, this stage is a really movement-heavy stage, and it really abuses a core mechanic of the game called extended rolls. So if you are to roll through an enemy while not holding Y, the roll button, and then later repress the Y button, you can activate when you get that speed boost from rolling through an enemy. And we pretty heavily abuse that through these strings of enemies to, manage when we get our speed boosts and, make sure we get over some of these gaps in this stage. So it's a really technical movement stage.
Now here's a great example of a stage that you almost never see. There actually is a really easy to do, well, it's easy to do most of the time because you can keep trying it, but there is a frame perfect trick that you can do to warp from the World 1 map screen to the end of this stage. So usually you just fly back to World 1 and then end up back at the end of the stage again, but you get to see actually showcased a pretty long stage, and honestly I think it's a very interesting stage. It's cool, you get to see Espresso, excuse me, and I don't know. It's just this is just one of the cooler stages with the sunset in the background and everything, and you're flying on trees. And here we have another water stage coming up. And the trick with the water stages, there really aren't many skips that you can do except for one that we'll see in the next one. But until then, the water stages, I think, in every category are identical. Correct me if I'm wrong.
Yeah, they don't have any bonuses in them, so even in 101%, you're just getting to the end.
Yeah, again, you just kind of have to respect them. And they're tricky too. You can lose a lot of time swimming around corners, and it's essentially a classic race where you really are trying to optimize every little movement and not bonk on a corner and lose a couple frames every single time you have to make a turn.
Yeah, it's a bit tricky with the swordfish on guard as well, because you can't just mash to get your lunges. You need to do, pretty precise, repetitive button taps to time each one and make sure you're doing the same specific lunges through each section.
One of my favorite little quirks about this game is that for some reason, the barrel on the right of this boss saves 1 frame. By picking up the left barrel, it lags the game for a frame, and the right barrel, it doesn't.
Oh, I think that was actually debunked.
Is it really?
Yeah, I think it was like, the tests that Tampa had did when testing the game, that was the case, like for that scenario, but it's not always the case.
That's actually really good to know, but everybody does still grab the right barrel most of the time, do they not?
I think so, just out of habit from, that being the tribal knowledge for so long.
That's crazy. I learned something today.
All right, I think this is going to be our first SJR that we're going to see attempted. But again, those are frame perfect, so there's no guarantee that we're going to see it here in this stage.
Yeah, I think Love's going to opt out of it.
We're opting out of this one. That's fair. It only saves like 5 or so seconds.
Yeah, it saves about 5, but if you miss it, you probably lose about 15 or 20, and there's so many of them packed into this run. This is probably the least worth it to go for.
Yeah, we get to see the cool barrel boost there. If you jump off of certain slopes while holding a barrel, you jump a lot faster and higher.
Yeah, my theory is that
slope with the keg there.
My theory is that they essentially programmed in something to stop you from being able to jump up slopes with barrels. So they apply a backwards force to you, but if you're going down slope, then that force gets applied in your advantage, and we can use it here to get a really cool string of jumps off of all these enemies that are normally just obstacles for when you're in barrels.
Ooh, slip slide ride. This is another stage that you normally just skip right at the beginning here, which is unfortunate because it's a really cool looking stage with a really cool sounding song.
Yeah, you don't get to hear this song in any other stage. This is the only stage that has this kind of environmental background with the crystals, and it's the only one that uses this song.
Yeah, this stage has the 6th of the dev intended warps above. If you grab the rope at the beginning, it warps you right about to this point in this stage. So.
All right, does somebody want to talk about how difficult Ice Age Alley is? I think it really just comes down to losing the bird is the problem.
I was going to say it's a lot more difficult without espresso, but
yeah.
I think it's worth mentioning that if you do take damage in this stage, you just kind of go flying, and it almost always results in you flying into a pit. So although you're not super likely to make a mistake, if you do, it can be such a huge time loss.
Yeah, and you actually, it's much faster, like significantly faster to skip the checkpoint barrel, not only because it's just faster to do it normally, but if you were to restart at the checkpoint, your run is over anyway, because it's just faster to actually start from the beginning with espresso than it would be to try for the checkpoint. All right, so here we're going to see a really cool glitch. Right here, we're going to set up what's called the split up glitch. We're going to throw a barrel and start select to get back out of the stage. This kind of confuses the game, and it's not sure whether we have 1 Kong or 2 Kongs, or if we have a backup Kong or not. We have to take damage over a pit, otherwise we'll soft lock the game, so that's what we just saw. And then now we're going to kill one of our Kongs while controlling both of them at the same time, and Diddy is going to be on Espresso, and it's going to end up in taking Espresso into the next stage here.
Right, so you could see that that setup was quite elaborate. It takes about between 25 and 30 seconds just to set up the glitch, but because this water stage is so extremely long, it's the longest stage in the game, excluding K. Rool, it ends up being well worth it to set up the glitch, and you end up saving upwards of 20 seconds by the end of it all by taking Espresso in through this stage.
Yeah, and this is something that's actually been known about for a long, long time. I mean, we're talking about, this was discovered over 10 years ago, I think, and it hasn't really been possible to incorporate into runs because it's just so difficult to use espresso underwater with the camera behaving the way that you can see it's behaving here. That's the collision on the water stages does not respond the way that you think it would to the walls don't really work. You can kind of clip inside of them, and the camera's constantly fighting you because it wants to take you on a very specific path, but just in order to optimize this is kind of nuts. So here, you have to play a lot of this stage blind. You have to kind of know where you're going, but also the walls don't even work right, so it's kind of difficult to even imagine what you're doing, even if you can see it.
Yeah, and you have to babysit the camera and get it to the end here, or else the exit won't spawn. You're playing part of the stage off screen, but you still have to get the camera to follow you to the end, or you can't exit.
Yeah, and if done properly, you can save up to like 25 or more seconds doing that, which is crazy.
It's crazy, especially because it includes a 25-second setup.
Yeah.
This is a cool stage. It's actually it's kind of a quick little stage, but you have to do it mostly in the dark. It's actually not too difficult to do once you know what's going on, but the reason that we don't grab squawks here for the light is because it actually lags the game horribly, which not only slows you down, but just makes the platforming more difficult because every time you turn your camera around, or every time you turn your character around, you're losing frames.
All right, so it looks like in Real Bridge Rumble here, we're setting up the super jump roll.
There it is.
We get it. So again, to do that, we take damage such that the Kong dies while jumping off the top of the screen. And then when we take damage the next time and become that Kong, as long as we run off a ledge and continue to hold B, we'll be able to infinitely bounce up into the air. So combining that trick with the jump roll, which is when you run off a ledge and bounce on an enemy on the same frame that you roll through them, we're able to get the effects of the super jump while continuously rising, combined with the jump roll where we're actually, normally just moving forward as if we're shot out of a barrel or something similar. And we're likely going to see a few more of those throughout the run. Or maybe like a couple more.
Yeah, as we get into these later stages, the stages start getting longer, they get more difficult, and there are a couple of auto-scrollers that would be really nice to skip.
Now, for this SJR, we're actually going to have to do a damageless variation of it. So we're going to set up the super jump here, and then try to do it such that we don't take damage, so that we can keep our Kongs for the next stage. And unfortunately, we missed the SJR, so we're going to have to play one of the hardest stages in the game. Without being able to skip over it here.
Right, and still trying to keep both Kongs at the end because the next stage, Trick Track Trek, which normally has the seventh and final developer intended warp, is a long auto scroller, but there is a way to skip large portions of it.
Yeah, I'd say the next stage coming up, Trick Track Trek, is probably the most crucial point in the run for Warpless specifically. Like 101% you play through pretty much the whole stage, and ideally you have to hit a couple frame perfect tricks to do it optimally. In this category, we're actually capable of using 1 or 2 frame perfect tricks to skip the entire stage, and, not just most of it like we do in 101. So the time save here is really, really crucial.
Hey, there we go. So that's jump roll number 1. Nailed it.
Yeah, lovebird gets the first jump roll, which is a DK only jump roll, which is why we want to do the damage list setup there. And since we got a double explosion when going through that Neki, I think we're going to be able to have an opportunity to go for some speed stacking here, but unfortunately we missed that one.
Yeah, it is possible if you get that double explosion, it allows you to essentially store your second roll, which will increase your speed. And when you go for a second jump roll that way, it gives you the jump roll as you normally would, but you actually get what we call 2 baddie speed. Essentially, every time you roll through an enemy, you get more speed up to a max of 4. So you get you can get a 2, 3, or 4 baddie speed depending on stages if you hit multiple jump rolls in a row.
And I think we do have another jump roll setup coming up right here.
Yeah.
Oh, but we don't get it, unfortunately.
Yeah,
I think that's the last one.
Yeah, and that one you see there was some intentional damage there. It's not. I believe that's not even a damage boost. It's just to help set up the timing of the cart, just so that way you can get that get it to walk off at exactly the right moment to hit that mini Nicky.
Lovebird was still able to skip basically the entire first half of the stage though with that first jump roll, so that's a big time save. But you can see how by missing the second jump roll, how long this stage is, having to wait for the ride to get to the end. As Silent Wolf mentioned, this is a crucial point in the run. I think you lose about a minute by missing the jump rolls.
All right, elevator antics. The tricks don't stop here. So what Lovebbird's going for during the second half of this stage is something called the Antics Blaster, which is a trick unlike any we've seen so far. It's not a super jump roll, not a super jump or anything like that. Maybe if you want to explain what's going on with this one, Lid.
Yeah, so what's going to happen here is there'll be a steel keg. When you throw a steel keg and then pick it back up and then crash it against the midway barrel, it actually allows you to hold an invisible object. So the game thinks you're still holding an object, but that object's gone. And as the game loads other objects into the scenery, the game can actually think you're holding something else, in this case, the return barrel from the bonus. And when you place the keg down, it mutates that barrel. And in this case, it happens to blast you to the end of the stage rather than just shoot you downwards like it normally would, which allows us to exit the stage very quickly there.
And how much does that actually save? Because that's a long stage with some, not auto-scroller, but there's some elements where you're stuck on some elevators that you have to kind of wait for them.
Saves a good, like, 12 or 13 seconds, I think, over playing it NMG style.
And a little more in this category since you wouldn't be able to use the bonus in Warpless, so...
Oh, yeah. Yeah, definitely not a warp or anything like that. It's a blast.
It is a blast, not a warp. Yeah, you won't see that trick in Blastless. So the thing about Engard is that he, not only do you have to do these precisely timed lunges every time, but he actually does get some iframes on those, and because of that, there are some small optimizations that you can do, but you do run the risk of losing Engard and having to chase after him a little bit.
Alright, coming up on yet another glitch, the rolling through air glitch, which we're going to use to roll through the air here and hopefully hit a jump roll on one of these birds. And there we go. Now we can float through the first half of this stage up until the glitch stops working for whatever reason. I think maybe like interacting with a piece of ground or an upcoming platform cancels it out, if I understand correctly. But
it has something to do with the geometry of the stage. If there's floor underneath you, then that's kind of it's considered different than when there's just like minecartable areas, so that the game kind of considers you to be in a slightly different state if you're in one of the minecart sections versus one of these where there's some ground.
And we're actually quite fortunate that there's a straight line that avoids pretty much all the minecarts in the first half of the stage, but there is eventually a B in a way that you do have to jump out of the jump roll state from, and so then you're unable to carry.
Yeah, and I believe there's only 2 enemies in the game that actually will hit you while you're in a jump roll state, and the reason that most enemies don't actually hurt you in the jump roll state is that the game thinks that you're still in a roll, and a lot of enemies can't hurt you while you're rolling. The exception being bees and mincers. I don't know if there's anything else, but I think it's just those 2. So it's unfortunate that your jump roll is stopped just by one of the few enemies in the game that actually will stop it. Just happens to be right in the right place.
yeah, Blackout Basement here, another very movement-intensive stage. We abuse a lot of extended rolls, and ideally don't make any mistakes along the way, because it's pretty scary when you're playing through this stage and you're not on your typical light cycle.
Yeah, as you play through it optimally, you kind of know when you're going to be able to see and at what point of the stage you're going to be at. And once those things get changed, it becomes a little difficult. Now this is literally one of the easiest bosses ever made, I think, especially if you know how to optimize it and just kind of kill these enemies as soon as they come out. But we actually, I believe we still take damage on this, unless that's changed. Yeah, so we go ahead and the interesting thing here is I think this saves about like 1.5 seconds to take damage here, because for some reason bosses don't pause while you're taking damage like the rest of the game does. Usually when you take damage, the whole game pauses for a second, but bosses, you can kind of avoid that, and because of that tiny time save, it's actually faster to then run into the next stage as DK and then go get Diddy and switch back to him. And you save, I think, 20 frames on the world map by not having both Kongs with you, so that's another small savings there. And this is, I would say, probably arguably the most infamous stage in any speedrun of this game.
Yeah, there's a couple opportunities to hit some jump rolls in this stage, which again are frame perfect, and you know, just like Trick Track Trek, we're in a slow order, so hitting those tricks will save quite a lot of time. We're coming up on those right now.
Hey, there we go. This is huge.
Yeah, that's the harder of the two jump rolls. You have to kind of wiggle in between the platforms after hitting it to make sure that you don't just land on one of them and cancel the trick. And then also you need to do a very precise wiggle here to dodge these bees.
Very nice.
Yeah, the height has to be very specific there too, because you want enough height to go over those bees without, you know, having too tight of a window, while also being low enough to get past the blast barrel that's right after there.
Yeah, because there is a barrel that if you're a little too high, it'll just shoot you to your death.
Yeah, and even with a pretty low creme tut, Lovebird manages to get over the bees.
Yeah, very impressive. And that saves about a minute over not getting roll stage. As Silent Wolf mentioned, there were a couple of backup opportunities, but it's a huge time save.
Ooh, ended up taking some damage here. So what we were trying to do here is there is a super jump roll that you can do. If you land on the edge of one of those animal crates, you can walk off the side of it, and it'll actually trigger a jump. And if you roll at on the same frame that you jump, like with any other kind of jump roll, it'll activate the jump roll. So there's a super jump roll possible just off of that Ramby crate, which ends up skipping this entire stage. But not only did we miss it, but we also lost Diddy, which is going to be a pretty decent time loss. Just because anytime you're playing Donkey Kong in this game, you're doing something wrong.
Yeah, you normally play most of this stage as Ramby too, up until pretty much the point that we're at now. So it's really awkward playing it as one of the Kongs in general, whether you're Diddy or DK, because no one's actually really routed it as far as I know.
Yeah, I did suggest that maybe for no major skips that animal buddies should be banned too, but nobody liked that. That's actually probably one thing that isn't that I don't think has a place in any category, is not using animal buddies in some of the stages.
Yeah, I think you're right about that. All right, we're gonna see
here
another.
Here's the first major SFR that was added to the run, and it is not the easiest trick in the world, but is much easier than doing the super jump roll that we used to do in this stage. And I believe it's actually faster. It was the first SFR that was faster than an SJR. Unless that's wrong. Somebody correct me if I'm wrong.
The SJR is still a little faster, especially if you do the 4-baddie SJR.
Oh, okay. Right. That makes sense.
But like the most optimal SFR is only like a second and a half slower, so
that's what it is.
You know, in a run that's 30, 40 minutes. Pretty small time loss for not needing to go for a frame perfect trick at the end of the run. Coming up at the end of the platforming stages here, so in all stages we actually do a trick called the Perils Wrong Warp, where we skip the next stage. The next stage being Platform Perils, which is notoriously, you know, one of, if not the hardest stages in the game. But in this category, we're actually going to have to play through it. And about halfway through, there is an opportunity for a jump roll that conveniently allows us to skip the second half of the stage, but Regardless, it's a very tough stage, and if we miss that jump roll, we're gonna have to see some pretty insane platforming towards the end there.
Yeah, it really is crazy. This is a very difficult casual stage, and it is a very, very difficult stage, even if you know what you're doing.
Yeah, like sometimes in speedruns, it doesn't always work out where like, you know, the stages get harder as you progress through the game casually, but sometimes in the speedrun, the last couple stages aren't too bad. In this game, it's actually kind of the hardest stage.
Yeah.
Oh.
Oh, hey. All right. Well, we won't watch it. Luckily, this actually is a pretty decent time savings, and it's a difficult trick. I mean, all the jump rolls are difficult because they're for the most part frame perfect, every single one of them. But yeah, this is huge because this is actually a really difficult platforming stage without it.
And just look at how we're like barely missing some of these enemies as we flip through the stage. Like how convenient is that? Like even that tire. I think if we hit a tire, we get intercepted by it too.
Or if you land on one of those platforms. I mean, we're pixels above some of those little falling platforms.
Alright, our boy Nicky is back. He's purple, and he's fully loaded with additional nuts. So just when you thought the hard stages were over, guess again.
Yeah.
Additional damage boost here to get the fastest possible final hitter.
Yeah, and you save a very small amount of time, I believe, by having DK out instead of Diddy for the little fanfare animation there.
Yeah, I see
Here we are.
Run so far. This is a very good run. Looking at that 37-minute time here, which is incredibly good.
Oh yeah, Lovebird's crushing it.
Some of the only mistakes we've seen are, you know, missing those frame perfect tricks, which, you know, is bound to happen on any given run.
And that's Warpless. I mean, Warpless really is about packing as many of these frame perfect tricks into a run as possible, since you don't have the advantage of being able to skip them through other means. It's usually the fastest way to beat a stage, if there is one in the stage.
Yeah, as you can probably tell by this point, the K-roll fight's not too intense. It's what we usually refer to as a glorified auto-scroller. If you're at this point in the run, you pretty much know what time you're going to end up with.
Don't sleep on the king, though.
But honestly, I'm pretty thankful for that. I'm much more a fan of, you know, doing the tough platforming stages and not needing to worry about weird boss fights.
Yeah, I totally agree. The bosses in this game are overall pretty straightforward. There's some tricky optimizations here and there on like the necky fights in particular, but no glitches really on speeding.
Yeah, hopefully one day we'll find a way to unlock credits, fake credits skip. Nobody knows if it's possible yet, but those fake credits that show up, if you were to die on this stage and then after having seen the fake credits and then go back into it, it skips them. So if there's some way that we could figure out to trigger that, we might be able to save a few seconds, but nobody knows if it's even possible.
Yeah, it's a thing on the Game Boy Advance version, because you can, you know, hit K-roll on that last hit before the fake credits and take damage at the same time as well, but I don't think you can do that here. All right, 37-36. That's a really good Warpless time.
Very good showcase. A good way to kick off this Warpless trilogy for sure.
Yeah, GG.
Yeah, I think after this we have Warpless DKC2, and then after that Warpless DKC3. So all those should be pretty exciting runs.
That's gonna be a fun time. Well, thanks everybody. This was a lot of fun. It was good commentating with you guys, and thanks to Lovebird for putting on this absolute monster of a category and kind of crushing it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Cool. I think with that we are probably out of here. Thanks for watching, everyone.
Yep. Thanks, everyone. Enjoy the rest of the marathon.
Thank you.